On this episode of the NG Podcast, we're welcoming our first celebrity guest, Loretta Harms, aka the Nil By Mouth Foodie, who I became aware of when the BBC did a piece on her in April this year on BBC News. We'll put links to Loretta's website, Instagram feed, and the BBC article in the bio of this episode for anyone who wants to follow her after listening to this. But when I saw the piece, I was fascinated as to how and why Loretta has persisted with a career in food despite being unable to eat anything for a number of years. And I am delighted she agreed to come on to the NG Podcast today. Loretta, welcome. How are you today?
Hi, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, not bad. I'm glad. I'm just pleased we managed to make this happen.
Yeah, great.
So, I said at the beginning, I spotted you on BBC News one morning. The BBC tends not to come up against stuff by accident. How did you end up featured on BBC Breakfast?
Well, Kirsty Brewer, the journalist who wrote the BBC article, put me in touch with one of the producers who was very keen to have me on the show. It was just a really surreal moment. I didn't think that it would have happened. It was an amazing kind of ticking off a bucket list kind of thing. So
I think I said to you that it was really good timing for me because I was actually running on a treadmill and I had the TV in front of it, and I was getting into that purple and very sweaty point, so it actually distracted me. I probably ran further than I normally do because there was actually something interesting on.
Yeah, it was so bizarre seeing my face on TV. My heart was pumping. And the interview itself went much more smoothly than I thought. I do have a thing of having a bit of a mouth on me. So I was a bit concerned being it was obviously able to be cut. But I obviously reined that in for the TV show. So.
Yeah, well, it would have been, it probably went smoothly because on that day you were being interviewed by a professional. I promise the same thing today. And also, you don't have to watch your mouth quite so much on the NG Podcast. It's kind of, we will not bleep you out.
Yeah.
I suppose one of the things that makes your story so interesting to many people is that you can't eat, but you've maintained your love of and your work with food. Where did the passion start and what's driven you to maintain it, even though you can't eat it or taste it?
I guess my passion for food first started when I was cooking in my nan's kitchen with my sister. Then it kind of over the years developed into helping my mum in the kitchen, cooking dinners. And in year 7, I would take over Tuesday nights and cook in their kitchen. And just having the free reign of it was just amazing, and I just love the creativity behind it. That's why I guess where it's just really begun. And for me, cooking requires multiple components, and taste is just one of them. So creativity and talent are much more essential in achieving a delicious tasting dish. You might be able to taste, but can you actually cook? Because you need kind of that area of things to be able to do something with it all. So I found ways to kind of overcome the obstacle of taste. And if you love something so much, I don't feel that passion never dies. And that's how cooking is for me.
Well, I have to say, I've been on your website. It's really great. And the photographs are fantastic. Absolute kudos to Amy, the photographer. And the recipes look fantastic. And I said we'll put a link in the bio of the podcast for anyone who wants to have a look. So how do you develop recipes and make sure they taste as good as they look when you can't taste them? After, just going back to the previous point, on cooking shows, they always say taste. Yeah. You, from what you said before, you found ways around that. So how do you do that?
Well, there's a lot of analysing and dissecting of an idea takes place before I actually get in the kitchen to try it out. And a lot of it, I have to think about the flavour combinations, the balance, the textures way more than anyone else. Mm-hmm. And once I get into the kitchen, I cook intuitively. and rely on aromas and visuals. And at the end of cooking, I get someone to taste it, but this comes with like a huge series of questions, and I describe what I'm trying to achieve. So yeah, they get a bit like, oh, like I'm like, blah, 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 and they're just a bit like, can you just let me taste it before you bombard me with questions? So yeah, that's how I kind of cook these days, really.
Yeah. So I've got a confession to make here. Is, as I said, I went on the website and I had a look, and there were some lovely recipes, and one really caught my eye, and it was the tiramisu overnight oats.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So this is really embarrassing.
You've actually done it.
This is my version of it, but it's an epic fail. We're going to put on the video podcast. We'll put a picture of what Loretta's recipe actually looks like. It does not look like this. So,
I'm sure it tastes good though.
And it almost certainly will, because one, I've started eating the coffee oats from the Great British Porridge Company, just almost every day. I love them, and that's what part of this is. But when we spoke, you sort of said, you can mix it up on the recipes, you can make changes. I changed far too much. The oats were too loose, and I decided that instead of using the cashew nuts to make the mascarpone equivalent, I actually used mascarpone and double cream, and that's too heavy to sit on my thin oats. So that's why there isn't any layering. But when anybody sees the actual recipe, they will be mighty impressed. I'm also making the excuse that I didn't have a really wide brimmed jar, so that affected the layering. But it's really quite embarrassing, because I do a lot of baking, and it usually looks a lot better than that. But so that's my confession, and me. Next time I will follow the recipe in absolute detail. So we're going to come back to your work with food, but before we do that, I'd like to talk a little bit about how you use your artificial nutrition. Unusually, you use parenteral nutrition and you have a nasal tube. In your case, a nasojejunal tube. Can you explain how you ended up with both?
Yeah, this question I get asked so much from a lot of people. My Hickman line that I use for parenteral nutrition is for feed purposes only, and my nasojejunal tube is for medications, as not all medications come IV. And due to my gastroparesis, taking medications that go into my stomach wouldn't work. So this tube kind of bypasses that kind of problem.
Oh, okay. So compared to a lot of people who use artificial nutrition, you really have double trouble. You've got to deal with the Hickman and the NJ tube, but you have a very active life. Looking at your social media, I've seen you out riding horses and swimming, as well as running your business. How do you manage to accommodate PN into doing that, and how have you learned to manage your PN so that you can continue to do everything you want to do?
For me, PN is actually one of the less restrictive compared to dealing with some of my other health issues. And I try not to let it get in the way of what I want to achieve or do. And I see it more of a challenge to try and find a way around obstacles. And usually there's always a way. And I think because I've been on it for like 6 years, you do kind of adapt. And over time, it becomes the norm. And I have a very limited time off of PN. I only have 5 to 6 hours each day. So timing of when I have my freedom of being unattached is crucial. And I kind of plan around that. There's a few little like nifty kind of, I guess, hacks. Like I've found a brilliant nifty little backpack I can carry my feed around in. And I have a portable fridge that can hold up to 9 feed bags that plugs into gas, mains, or in the car, which is like perfect for holidays or anywhere around going in the UK. And I recently found a company that specializes in safe, completely seal-proof shower and swimming dressings, which has been life-changing. And the most crucial of all is actually mindset, because you can still pursue and achieve despite limitations. It just takes a bit of imagination and like open-mindedness. And I feel like quite a lot of people think it's a be-all and end-all when you can't live and you have to be attached to an IV pole for, 20 hours a day. But it doesn't have to be if you don't want it to. There's ways around kind of those limitations.
Yeah, yeah. And I have to say, I think I saw a post where you were talking about the bag that you put your Hickman in order to be able to go swimming. Is that something you'd wanted to do for a long time, but you couldn't?
Yeah, a ridiculous amount of time. We're talking since I had TPN, which is like 6-7 years ago. And sometimes I would just kind of be like, screw it, let's just go into the pool, but be careful. But it's always a huge risk to sepsis, and it's not really recommended. So finally finding a company that can completely reassure me that my line is safe and the whole of the line is actually contained in this kind of dressing bag has just been amazing. And it kind of is like a stoma bag, and it's a brilliant idea. So it's just given me that kind of freedom of what TPN has actually taken away, which is my love for kind of water. So it's very exciting.
Yeah. So maybe we'll get the link to that company off you and put that in the bio under this as well, so that
it will help a lot of people.
If other people want to have a look at it, then they can. And I guess it's also about healthcare professionals knowing what's out there, and if it took you a while to find it, then people maybe just don't know. So we'll share that as well. When we spoke initially, you also mentioned the issues that occur if you're traveling or trying to attend events in relation to security and accommodating luggage. Can you explain some of the obstacles in relation to that you've had to overcome that are probably common to quite a number of people that use PM?
Yeah, I would say traveling abroad isn't plain sailing at all, and it's probably the biggest restriction of being on TPN. You have to plan months and months in advance. You have to organise and communicate with hospital teams, home care companies, and the airline to accommodate everything. There needs to be lots of letters to be written to make sure it all goes smoothly during the airline and with customs, and getting all the medical packages on the plane. But I wouldn't have been able to have known what to do if it wasn't for Pint, the charity. And they have a brilliant holiday guide, and they're a great support. And I got everything that I learned, and the whole process all the way through was thanks to them. And it is achievable and it is possible, but it's just very difficult. It's not plain.
So don't assume it's just going to happen. It's you've got to be all over it.
Yeah. There's a massive amount to tick off, but it's definitely worth it if you can experience life abroad and travel and things like that and have some holiday time.
Yeah, and I think my background's nursing, but until I started really talking to people who use artificial nutrition, because it happens with enteral nutrition as well, the amount of stuff you've got to take, you end up with great big trunks. You kind of say, well, oh yes, you'll be able to go on holiday, the companies will sort it out. But actually, when you see what you have to drag about and what you're dealing with and the uncertainty at the other end, I think it really opened my eyes to how determined you have to be to want to do this, in order to go through that extreme planning. It's bad enough planning to go on holiday anyway.
So parental nutrition is actually much more kind of harder to go away with, because you have to have refrigerated bags that need to be in these huge boxes. You can fit like 3 in a box. So you're going away for a week, you need 3 massive hefty boxes that you can't actually lift yourself. And they all have to be kind of, then contained in a refrigerated space when you get to the hotel. And it's just, you've got also bags of saline and you've got all your ancillaries, and you've got not hundreds, but you've got a ridiculous amount of bags and things you need to take. But sometimes airlines don't always allow stuff on. And that's when it's a bit like, it's a bit of hit and miss when it comes to airlines. Yeah.
And on the NGPodcast, we tend to talk to people who use enteral nutrition, and we've spoken to a number of people who use that, and they've become real experts in managing their own care, and have talked at times about some of the difficulties arise when they interact with some CPs in certain circumstances. You're the first person we've had on who uses PN. So can you tell me about some of the challenges you've had in maintaining control of your own health when you've needed to access services acutely?
Yeah, I would say a massive issue that I think all patients with Hickman lines have is our life is literally on the line. So since Hickman lines need to be accessed in a non-touch and sterile technique, not many nurses or doctors are trained, and they don't know the severity of their actions if they don't do it correctly or this way. And a lot of us, we need to fight and protect our lines as much as we can in those situations. And despite being very ill, we usually have to care for our lines like ourselves. So when I go into A&E and it's pretty much got sepsis and I'm getting really ill, I would still have to fight and take my own cultures while I'm shivering and not very well, because you can't let inexperienced nurses do it. And unfortunately, there isn't a team in the hospital that can come down and do it who are kind of trained. Mm-hmm. I've been in hospitals a lot, and different multiple hospitals, and it's scary how much there's no awareness on it, and there's not enough trained staff. There's only if you're lucky, one ward that can actually deal with your lines, and a lot of the time the beds are packed.
Yeah. But I think that's where sometimes, as healthcare professionals, we may have to wind our necks in and let the people who use the stuff and it's their life, we have to sometimes listen more carefully, because it's really easy, I guess, to charge in and do the kind of I am to the rescue piece, whereas you could do a bit of damage if you do, especially in a situation like with a Hickman line. If you don't know exactly what you're doing. And it is, there's a lot of PN, but in the great scheme of things, a lot of healthcare professionals, if they see them, they don't see them that often, whereas the people who do it all the time tend to be really good. So it's really interesting to hear your perspective on that. So if we go back to your career, obviously, you built up a good following on Instagram anyway, and that's part of how you got picked up by the BBC. Since the recent increase in profile, what other opportunities have come your way, and how are you using your experience to help other people who have problems with eating and drinking?
So I've been super grateful with the amount of opportunities that have come my way since all the BBC kind of lifted off. I've been starting to work with a medical technology company as a consultant to try and help make improvements from a patient's perspective, which is brilliant because these are the services, devices and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm really kind of looking forward to doing a bit more with them about this. And I'm going to be collaborating with a local restaurant and having one of my dishes on the menu, which is really exciting, to do the food kind of area. And I've got quite a lot in the pipeline. I wanted to work with a lot of charities, which are kind of related to my difficulties. And it's given me the confidence to kind of share more on my Instagram about my health related topics, which I hope will help the onlookers and patients alike, because it's been a slow process of getting to a point where my account is not all food. It's also kind of a balance of life, health, and kind of the recipes that I like to share with everyone. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
I must admit, I follow you on Instagram, and the variety of stuff is really good. And there were some really good little quotes, almost thoughts for the days, little bits of inspiration, and they were really good. I really enjoyed those. Keep doing them; it helps me. So I know one of the things that you've been doing is working with a charity that focuses on people with swallowing difficulties, to help people have a better experience of food by, I think you sort of took the challenge of developing versions of people's favorite meals so that they could still enjoy them, even though, even though they couldn't have the usual version. And I think you took quite a big challenge as one of the first ones. Can you tell us a little bit about that work and what the challenge
is? It's still in the early days, but it's a massive kind of passion project for me. And it's I just love the thought that I could use my kind of cooking ability to try and like help someone's situation and kind of fall back in, hopefully into a better relationship with food, because I know how not very nice it is when you're in pain or you can't eat as what you like because of all your kind of gut problems. So I've got a few recipes I'm developing at the moment to try and help that. And I've also started a gut-friendly Friday on my Instagram. And this is where I'll be creating kind of gut-friendly recipes, including the following ones, and talking all things kind of digestive health and gut health that I've learned along the way throughout my journey, which I hope would help those kind of who were in my situation.
And so you're really busy. You're spinning a lot of plates. Are there any other big projects you're working on that you can share?
I can't say too much, but there might just well be a story on the way.
Okay.
Might be story time.
Yeah, excellent. Well, you'll have to let us know when and if that happens, and we'll try and help and spread the word. Because I think just the stuff on the website, which is relatively brief, is really fascinating. So if there's an opportunity to kind of dive into that a bit more, it'd be really interesting.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So yeah, it's just a lot kind of going on, which I'm really looking forward to, and it's given me a big purpose and healthy focus, and it's been an amazing experience up till now.
Brilliant. Well, listen, it's been a real joy having you on and obviously talking to you beforehand. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the NG podcast, and good luck in the future. We will be following the story as it develops over time. But for now, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll speak soon.
Sure thing. Bye.
Bye. In the NG podcast, we hope to bring you content that's of interest to anyone involved in enteral feeding, whether you're a healthcare professional, a patient, or a carer. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you do, please subscribe or like on whichever platform you're either viewing or listening to this on. Here we go.